to you our next speaker, Bill Terra. Bill is the founder of the Human Ecology Project, and he's been a health counselor, a teacher, an author, and also he has dedicated over 55 years to creating and building health education in centers in both and North America. We also want to say that his innovative and creative teachings of traditional approaches to health, healing, and personal development has taken him to over 20 countries around the world, leading as a seminar leader. And I think he's just returned back from one of those trips as well. He is so fabulous. His latest book, called How to Eat Right and Save the Planet, is now available worldwide. It is our great pleasure to welcome our one and only, our friend, Bill Terra. Hi, Bill.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And thanks to all of you that have organized the 7th Virtual Yoga Festival and Health Expo. The topic that we have in front of us here, that I have in front of me, I should say, is how to eat right and save the planet. And food and nutrition, which Marlene was speaking about earlier, is just a huge topic. And so I want to get right in on the deep end and talk a little bit about a little bit of history, because it's really important for us to understand how we fit into the whole natural landscape, because we always make an assumption, I think, that we know how to relate to our environment, but we don't understand some of the relationships that we have to it, which are going to be essential as we move forward and try to figure out how we solve the problems that we have created, because the problems that are facing humanity right now are self-made. And we don't have a lot of time to take care of those problems, really. So I want to get right into the deep end of it. And the slide that's up on your screen right now, or I hope is up on your screen right now, it is comprised of two different elements. And one of them shows the 2.5 million year human evolution, gives you an idea of the amount of time that we have evolved on the planet. But the little clock up in the corner is an interesting one. And that is a 24-hour clock of what's happened on planet Earth since the planet was formed. And the interesting thing about that is that you'll note that the human beings don't show up until 1 second before the 24-hour cycle. So we're really the new kids on the block. And it's because of all this evolution is built into us. And because we're very new, there are some problems that we've occurred along the way, which might be important for us to look at. We found ourselves on this planet in what you could honestly call paradise. You couldn't imagine a planet that was more suited for human life. The atmosphere, the water, the weather, the food sources, such diversity was built into this. And so we had this wonderful planet to build into. And one of the things that we did was we started traveling. From our home in Africa, our original home, we walked and walked and walked and walked all over the world. If you could, it's almost difficult to imagine the extent of that migration. And that migration was made possible because we had an environment which was very helpful to us along the way. And the most helpful part of that environment was the relationship that we had with plants. You see, plants are autotropic. They can take all of the elements of the planet. They can take the light from the sun. They can take the oxygen from the air. They can take the CO2 from the air. They can take soil, the minerals from the soil. They can take water, and out of that, they can produce everything: carbohydrate, protein, vitamins, fats, minerals, oxygen, fiber. All of those things that are essential for animal life are created by plants, because animals can't just sit in the sun, put their feet in the ground, and suck up and nourish themselves. And that allows us to make the epithelial tissue, the connective tissue, the muscle tissue, the nervous tissue, the blood that makes it possible for us to be alive. It's a very simple process. And it doesn't make any difference what animal we're talking about. The process is the same. Now, if we are a carnivorous animal, what happens is we need another animal in there. But what happens if we're not a carnivorous animal, but we put an animal in there anyway? And this is one of the problems that we have facing us right now, and the whole dilemma about what we should eat in order to be healthy. Because the same process of making carbohydrate, protein, etc., all of the macronutrients and the fiber that we need, and then creating animal tissue out of that, what we have done is we've taken that process and we've formalized it so that we increasingly depended on animals for our food. Now, it's very true that we did eat animals in the past, and most of that was a process of finding ourselves in parts of the world environment that were inhospitable for plants. So when we found ourselves in very high altitudes, or we found ourselves in places where the soil was very poor, or whether the weather was very inclement, we depended on animals, either for flesh or for eggs or for their milk products. And that's fine. That was part of an ecological demand. But what we find now is that we don't have that ecological demand. Right now, what has happened is we've formalized the whole process of eating animals, so that what happens is that the animal makes all of the tissue that we are made of, and then we eat the animal, and we have to break down that tissue, the tissue, for instance, of a cow or a goat or whatever. We have to break down that tissue into its original parts and then incorporate them again to make the tissue that we need. So we've inserted this other unnecessary element into the whole process of life. We've absorbed animals. These actions were driven not by necessity. They were driven by mythology, some of which we'll look at, but they are contrary to our biology, and they're very ecologically inefficient. The breakdown of nutrients and reassembling them again is really kind of a silly process when we look at it from that way. We don't, even if we don't encounter any other product here, any other problem. Now, if we were a creature from another planet, an alien who came down to Earth, and we saw human beings and we captured a human being, the first thing that we would ask ourselves, which is what any anthropologist asks themselves when they encounter a new animal, and we do encounter new animals every once in a while in deep jungle areas, the first thing that we need to know is, what does this animal eat? We can only understand that animal's physiology if we understand what it eats. And when we look at human physiology, we notice some very curious things, particularly given the light of the fact that nutrition has been driven by the fact that we're supposed to be eating animal quality food for, you name it, over 100 years. When we look at the human mouth, we see that the mouth has cheeks, for instance, which usually means, and always does mean actually, that whatever it is that we eat, we hold it in our mouth for a long time, particularly when you look at the enzymes in the mouth, which break down carbohydrate. So that means that what we ate in our evolution was primarily food that we had to chew a lot and keep in our mouth, and it was mostly carbohydrate. When we look at our teeth are grinding teeth. These are teeth that are built for nuts and seeds and beans and grains. They're the grinding molars. That's what the dominant teeth is. We sometimes laughingly refer to these as canine teeth, but these aren't real canine teeth. They don't come out. And if you imagine a mouth of a carnivorous animal, you notice that our mouth is completely wrong. A carnivore's mouth goes all the way back here to the jaw area because you have to bite and hold on to flesh in order to tear it. That's part of the evolutionary process. When we look at the human stomach, we notice that the stomach is not designed for meat or any animal food really, because it doesn't have the level of acidity that's needed. There's about 7 times the amount of acid in a carnivore stomach as in the human stomach. We burn holes in our stomach by eating the food of a carnivore, and then we have ulcers when we complain about it. The same with the intestines. We have extraordinarily long intestines. Carnivores can't have intestines like that. If carnivores have intestines like that, they would die of putrefaction. You can't put meat in a long, large intestine. You have to have short intestines. The food passes through very quickly in a carnivore. And lastly, hands. When we talk about our hands, it's kind of a joke, really, because we will usually end up breaking fingernails trying to open very simple things, let alone hanging on to a moving animal. It's irrational. So how did we come about with this kind of seemingly crazy theory about what we ate in the past? It's a very strange dilemma. We'll talk about it in just a second. But the one thing that we can say is that the food that we eat has enormous impact on us. And we're just starting to understand that. It's bizarre that it's taken this long. But the food we eat, of course, has to do with our health. And we'll talk about some of the health implications in a moment. It has to do with ecology, because we have to take our food from the environment. We harvest all of our energy from the environment. It has to do with social justice. To have a diet like the modern food system absolutely requires us to have what I refer to as food slaves, and which are recognized as food slaves. People who are in poverty, who work usually very, very long hours for next to nothing in order to produce food for the wealthy countries of the world. So I would imagine everybody that might be watching this, we all have food slaves. We have people all over the world who live a very poor existence, a very low quality existence, and have no freedom of movement or freedom of protection for themselves and their families, because we want cheap food. And so that's how it gets produced. And that the modern food system doesn't work unless you have that social injustice. And then there's animals, respect for sentient life. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in detail as we go along. But this is something that most people who study yoga, for instance, know very well is ahimsa. This is not doing any harm. And so when the food that we eat does harm to other beings, sentient beings, and that means that they feel, they play, they have affection for their family, they protect their young. These are all signs of sentience. There are brothers and sisters on planet Earth. So let's talk a little bit about the confusion that exists here. Our biological needs, what do we need? Well, for so many years now, the story has been that we absolutely need animal protein. And that myth has completely been dispelled now. There really is no confusion about this anymore, except confusion that's created by those people, and that includes some government agencies that depend on us eating animal quality food for the economy. So it becomes an economic decision, not a biological decision. It has been proven time and time and time again over the past, particularly the last 50 years, that there is absolutely, positively, no need for any animal product in a healthy diet. You can eat a healthy diet as long as it's a vegetable quality diet and it's diverse enough, right? If you're not just eating one thing, right? Most people make decisions about what they want to eat in terms of the sensations, the sensory sensations. So, I like the way that it tastes. Well, that's okay if you like the way that it tastes, but it's killing you. I tell a story to my students sometimes, and people laugh a lot about it, but it's a true story. I had a client many years ago, and he had very, very high blood pressure. He had huge cholesterol problems. He had suffered a heart attack already. And I was giving him some health advice, and I told him that he couldn't eat cheese. And he became very belligerent. He folded his arms and scowled at me. And I said, is anything wrong? And he said, yes. He said, I would rather die than eat cheese. And I thought he was kidding. I made the mistake of laughing, and he wasn't kidding. I was thinking, here is a man who has almost died, and I'm telling him all he has to do is avoid one food, and that'll improve his life. It'll improve the fact that he can have a life. And so he's equating this and saying, oh, life, cheese, life, cheese. Which one do I choose? Which one would you choose? Which one would I choose? I mean, obviously we would choose life, right? We wouldn't choose cheese death. We would choose life. Now, you may think that that's over dramatizing, but it's not. It's been proven that the dairy food is one of the main contributors to heart disease. The main contributors. And the only people that put out information that say that that's not true are the people who benefit financially from that mythology. The investigative journalist, Marion Nestle in America, has pointed out that 90% of all nutritional studies that are done on specific foods are sponsored by food companies, the food companies that make the food. So we have to be very careful here. Tradition. We talk about tradition. Marlene and I have given health counseling in many countries, and I've traveled all over the world and talked to people about their health habits and their diets. And one of the main fallbacks is that, well, I eat this food because it's traditional. Now, I know that it's a good thing to have traditions and to respect your traditions. There's no reason why most traditional diets can't be converted to a vegan diet very easily and have very similar tastes and food textures, etc. But this is a question. Just because something is a tradition, does that mean it's good? Well, it doesn't. I mean, how recently was it that there were traditions that women couldn't work? How recently was it that human beings were enslaved? It was tradition at that time. Many of the health medicines that we take right now were seen to be traditional. Many of the ideas about tradition were there, and they were found to be false. So tradition is really not always a good criteria to use in terms of a healthy diet. Advertising. Much of, as I said before, much nutritional information is nothing more than advertising, polished up to look like it's scientific study. So these are things that cause a great deal of confusion, but we have to start looking at some different qualities right now. And that's making people also confused, because food economy is important. How do we feed the billions, 8 billion, approaching 8 billion people? How do you feed 8 billion people on planet Earth? It's an important issue. And it's one that most people don't like to think about when they're out buying food, but we have to think about it. What happens with sustainability? How can we keep producing crops and producing food products that are not sustainable? So we've created a fatal error, and the biggest portion of that fatal error has had to do with animals. Animals are sentient beings. As I said, you can't own them. Ownership should not be a quality. These are creatures that we should be sharing the planet with, and not that we should be breeding in order to grow very fast and artificially pumping them up and then killing them so that we can eat them for our pleasure, and that become a dominant problem in all aspects of life. So we're exchanging nature for profit, the same way that we do with pulling petroleum products out of the earth or cutting down forests. this is a narrative which is based on killing. It's a narrative which is sometimes referred to as autocratic thinking. You know, this is where we start to think that we are in charge of all of nature, and that's a very serious problem. It's a very serious issue to deal with, because we're not. In fact, we're one of the only creatures on the whole planet that could be taken off the planet. Human beings could just disappear overnight, and the planet would start to heal itself. And I don't see that because I'm against humans. I say that because this is the precarious position that we're in, because we have this narrative of domination and a narrative that it's essential for us to kill in order to live. And so we've adopted a philosophy of greed instead of need. What we need is very little. What we want, oftentimes, is really a lot. And we have to make balance with that. It's extraordinarily important. If we don't, what happens is we have bad karma. What is karma? Karma, in this sense, is just cause and effect. When you go against the patterns of nature, what happens is that nature reverses back on you. Your behaviors ripple out into the world, and they cause things to happen. And if those things are mistaken, if they're bad decisions, what happens is you get bad results. The modern diet, which is based around animal food and sugar and additives, primarily those are the big three. So when you talk about eggs and chickens and milk and meat, these are shown as being the causal factors in most of the degenerative diseases. These are the non-communicable diseases like cancer and diabetes and heart disease, many autoimmune diseases, inflammation processes, stroke, etc. You can go on and on and on and on. And the primary factor in those illnesses is what we eat. And so here we are, we're eating ourselves to death because we're making decisions that are not comprehensive decisions. They're not respecting the fact that everything is one. If we eat a diet, for instance, that is good for the environment, it will automatically be good for us. The diet that we eat is the greatest source of pollution of air, water, and soil. The runoff from agriculture, both conventional plant agriculture and the agriculture involved in feeding animals, involves runoff, huge amount of runoff. Nitrogen and other chemicals that are used run into the streams, they run into the rivers, they end up in the oceans, and they create what are accurately called dead zones, where no life exists. Why does it not exist? Because the pollution kills off oxygen creating planktons. I mean, what a mess, right? Undrinkable water. And we talk about air pollution. Well, one of the biggest pollutions of air is that there's a decreasing amount of oxygen in the world. Why? Because we're cutting down forests. Why are we cutting down the forests? In order to grow food for people? No. In order to grow food for animals. Why? So that we can eat the animals, even though we don't need to. The same is true in the ocean. We take the fish, which are the fish that we like the most are the carnivorous fish like salmon and swordfish and tuna and fish like that. And those are at the top of the food chain. And when you do that, when you knock the top of the food chain off, what it does is it ripples down to those creatures that consume plankton. And they start eating plankton. Now, most people think that the forests and grasslands of the world are the source of our oxygen, but they're not. They're only a source of a third of our oxygen. All the rest comes from phytoplankton in the ocean. And so this is incredible. There's been a 40% reduction in phytoplankton over the last 50 years. And that means that the ability of the planet to keep producing oxygen is being killed off. Why? Again, because of our own habits and primarily the food that we eat. The same is with the loss of diversity. You know, because we concentrate so much on a few animals that we breed and overbreed in order to eat, we have created this lack of diversity. There are fewer and fewer wild animals in the world, till there are almost none. We're killing off wild animals, but we're increasing these animals that we brutally breed and breed and breed and overbreed so that we can have them. It's loss of diversity, the same as the loss of diversity in monocropping. Marlene mentioned this earlier. When you have a diet that is based on such a simplistic approach to nutrition, what happens is we start overproducing foods that are non-essential and wasting a lot of the food that we use. I don't know if you're aware of this, but in America, 45% of all the food that is purchased is wasted. So we have to think about this, because this is an important part of developing an approach to nutrition and to eating, which is beneficial to us. Oh, I've got my slides aren't going. There we go. And so what we're surrounded with is fake news. I'm sorry about that with the slides, but the computer kind of stuck there for a minute. We're very susceptible to fear. And one of the fears that we have is the fear of sickness. And rightfully so. We don't want to be sick, and we don't want to die prematurely. But fear is interesting motivation, because it can be very misused. For instance, what if you're a parent and you read articles consistently that if you don't feed your children a certain food, or if they don't get certain vitamins, they'll be stunted? Now, that doesn't have to be based on science. That can be just an opinion. The science is pretty clear on what you should eat. As I mentioned before, a healthy vegan diet is one of the best diets in the world, the best diet in the world. And that's particularly goes for children, right? But if you keep hearing all the time, no, if you don't give your children milk, they wouldn't grow bones. You know, how did the cow grow bones? How does a gorilla grow bones? You know, I mean, what are we talking about here? That we don't have vitamin C. You know, you won't grow to be healthy. Well, that's true. We do need vitamin C. We need some of it, but we don't have to have orange juice every day in order to have vitamin C. That's not essential, because this is when we get into silver bullets, miracle foods. All of a sudden, if a particular food is sold and marketed because it has almost mythological qualities, and we have to watch that, because it happens all the time, and it happens with healthy foods. You know, otherwise healthy foods are seen to be have some sort of miraculous benefits, when they don't at all. They're just foods, and some of them might be good. And so, particularly in the form of nutrition, we have what I call white jacket syndrome. If somebody puts on a white doctor's jacket, particularly if they put a stethoscope around their neck, then everybody falls at their feet. But this has been provably poor. In my youth, I remember that doctors smoked cigarettes while they were interviewing you. My family doctor in California, as a child, was always smoking a cigarette. He was smoking a cigarette and putting it out, and smoking a cigarette and lighting up another cigarette. Doctors were recommending that mothers not nurse their children, that they feed their children formulas, which were proven very, very wrong by the 1960s to be completely the wrong way to go. And so we have to be careful here in the decisions that we make. Marlene referred to our websites, two websites, Human Ecology Project and Macro Vegan. And on those, you'll see an outline of what we consider to be a really healthy diet. and you can get free downloads off of our website, which conform and tell you why this kind of template is a very good one. And it's just based around grains, beans, nuts, seeds, fruits, nuts, vegetables. It's a few simple condiments, right? And it can be the tastiest diet that you'll ever taste. I have to do the compliment to Marlene here. I have never yet seen a person who was new to veganism or even eating healthfully in any way come to us for dinner and not walk away saying, "Oh my God, I didn't know that that kind of food could taste that good." It's very possible, and so I give a plug to her book here because it's the best vegan book that you can get. It has lots of really good information in it, both nutritional and energetic, and fantastic. So what is the bottom line? All right, what is the payoff here? Well, the payoff is our understanding has to be that what we do moves away from us into the world and affects the world that we live in. The personal is planetary is a slogan that we use. Everything, every product that you buy, every service that you participate in has an effect. And we have to be conscious of those effects. And food is the place that we can make that effect the most. You know, people tell me oftentimes, they say, well, I'm really concerned with what's happening in the environment. And then they tell me that they still eat animal sourced foods. Well, those two things are completely antithetical for me. We have to know that the single most thing that human beings can do right now to assist in cleaning up of the planet and reversing climate change is to stop eating all animal foods, all of them. That we can still do all the other good things. We can still recycle. We can still take care of the plastic in our houses. We can still do all of those things and eat well. But the eating well part is the biggest thing. And it's the one that is most resistant because food is usually an emotional issue. This is not about nutrition. This is about emotion. And so we have to center ourselves and make the good decisions. And really contribute to what's happening in the world, because there's a lot of good things happening in the world amidst all the chaos, and we can be part of those good things that are happening. And we're probably already being a part, but we can be a better part. Have to make good decisions. So that's great. If I don't know how much time we have left because my clock, my little timer stopped here along the way. But if anybody has any questions or anything like that, we can do that.
I was just trying to see again, and if any of our viewers are out there and has a question for Bill Terra right now, you can definitely type it in the chat below, and he is here to answer one or two questions before our next performer. So if you have any questions for Bill, you can definitely type it in now. And I do just want to take this quick moment to say, Bill, thank you so much for sharing all of this insight today. It's definitely makes me feel like I need to take a big breath, which I'm sure we all feel, because it's the reality that we're facing currently at this time.
Yeah, it is a reality. You know, quite a few years ago, American politician Al Gore made a documentary which won an Academy Award called "The Inconvenient Truth," and people forgot about it really quickly. But it is an inconvenient truth. It's one of those truths that we have to look at and we have to say, my gosh, this is a reflection of reality. And it is inconvenient. It might even be uncomfortable sometimes, but we have to do it.
Absolutely. And I do want to let you know that there is a question here that came in.
Yeah.
And I wanted to just to address it to you. Bill's going to have time to answer one question here for us. And it's from Banu, and it says, what's your take on the political influence on the vegan wave? What's your take on political influence on vegan wave?
Well, the vegan way of life is very threatening to politicians, and for a very good reason. because the food economy is the biggest economy in the world. We always talk about the energy and we talk about, the digital economy and all the rest of it. No, 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 it's food. Food lies at the basis of it. And so decisions that are made about the environment and about health too are oftentimes driven by protecting the economy rather than the final outcome. The and this goes to a certain degree into a level of insanity where you have governments that will accept and produce documentation that says that people should eat less. They never say exclude, eat less animal food, eat less dairy food, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yet they are subsidizing those industries, because if people were paying the real price for milk, cheese, butter, eggs, all of it, if they're paying the real price, the consumption would go way down indeed, because you couldn't afford it. Right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bill. And again, thank you for your time today. And
Thank
again,
you.
for sharing just incredible insight today and just, again, opening our eyes to our reality. And I think you said it the best when you said we have to just dedicate ourselves to making better choices. There are a lot of good things that we're doing, and making these better choices, protecting our animals, and doing better is really what we have to do right now as a collective. So, Bill, thank you again so much. I know you're just
Thank you.
settling in back home for your trip, and I want to say again, anybody who wants to hear more from Bill, Bill Terra, you can definitely visit thehumanecologyproject.com. We're going to put it down in the chat below, and also macrovegan.org. Bill Terra, thank you so much for being here
Thank
again
you.
today.
Bye now.
I'm wishing you lots of love and hope to see you guys again soon.